all you're doing is talking and you're not listening to somebody else, you're not qualifying what it is that they need, you're not going to be successful, because enough people will sniff that out that like they get uncertain. They don't, even if they buy something from you once, they won't come back and buy again.
Welcome back to another episode of Sell the Truth. I'm your host, Eli Stoehr. Man, this is a special episode for me. So I've got the one and only B. Hess in the house. Brian's been a mentor of mine for you just posted on Facebook. We've been connected for 7 years.
7 years, man.
And those of you who know Brian has an immense background of successful sales experience, and so I've learned probably 90% of what I know in sales from Brian. The other 10% is, from other folks that have poured into me, as well as, stuff I've read or seen or watched online. But it's so important to have a mentor in your life who truly pours into you. And I just want to say, I appreciate you for jumping on. Appreciate you for the past 7 years and believing in me when I was a wee little toddler, basically.
Like last week, you mean?
Basically last week. But we really wanted to dive into a topic that I feel like it's not covered enough. Sales is not a difficult thing, man. Sales is not difficult. Now, the execution of it, right, you have to be disciplined. But I really want this topic of today's podcast to be on going back to the basics in sales, the basic fundamentals. Because if you don't have the basic fundamentals as a salesperson, as a sales leader, dialed in, you could use all the word tracks. You could use all the different tools, different things that people talk about online and influencers talk about online. But if you don't go back to the basics, you don't have the good fundamentals, like what are you doing, right? It's not going to work out. So I want to ask you, like, what does going back to the basics, what does that actually mean to you when it comes to sales?
Man, I think that people do way overcomplicate sales, right? Because it is ultimately at its simplest form, it's a game of numbers, right? It's like, what is your skill level? What is your experience level versus, how much effort are you putting out? Because there's only a few levers that you can pull in sales to be able to make a difference, right? It's like, how many chances are you taking? How many shots are you taking? What is your percentage of conversion on those things? And then what's the average of whatever transaction that is? What's the average proposal transaction, the average, transaction that gets converted? That's what spits out revenue. And then there's margin percentages and all kinds of stuff that go into it. But I think that what happens, especially in the online space, like so many people are out there trying to give, all the fancy advice that gets likes and comments and shares and things like that. And, anybody that is really, really successful in sales, it's not from doing anything fancy. It's from doing the basics really well. And it doesn't mean that there's not things out there that you can learn, strategies or tactics that can help you be a better communicator, that can help you explain things better. But when it comes down to it, man, the basics to me are, picking up the phone, sending enough emails, creating enough opportunity, because at the end of it, the calculations that are done are based on how much effort you put out, how many you converted. And that's how simple it is. And I think people get that overcomplicated. They think, they bank too much on a couple of deals. Those deals don't come in, their whole year is sunk, right? And so the basics is always having a healthy enough funnel, right? So creating yourself enough activity and then following a process that leads to predictable results. And, those that do it best, that's exactly what they do. They just follow a specific sales process that leads to the predictable results that they want. And those are the people that last the test of time in sales, because the people that bank on emotions, they get their emotions all tied up in it. They just burn out too quick, right? They can't sustain especially through difficult times. They're not able to kind of overcome that. And so, those that keep it simple are those that are most successful.
Yeah. And I want to add something to that too. I think it was Grant Cardone. Sell or Be Sold was the book. Sell or Be Sold by Grant Cardone. Old book. I don't 100% agree with Grant Cardone's approach to sales fundamentally, but like he has some good, a few good pieces. And one of those things is like, dude, you got to be sold on yourself and you got to be sold on the product that you're selling too. Like, if you're selling something that's, a pile of garbage, right? You could be the best salesperson in the world. Like, you are, one, going to burn out, or two, you're not going to be able to, find anyone to sell it to because you don't believe in it yourself. So, is that something that you could speak on? I mean, you've been in sales for years. You've sold everything from cell phones to leading teams to selling cell phones, asphalt, insurance. I think.
Yeah, selling now, selling an opportunity to work for us in a lot of ways. It's like, but it's the most important sale you'll ever make is yourself, and having that confidence, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to buy from or do business with somebody that has uncertainty written all over them, right? It's like, well, why are you uncertain? Maybe I should be uncertain, right? That's the transfer of belief is so important. And it's like, man, if you don't believe in your product, like if you don't believe that you're the only choice or the preferred choice to do business with, then what are you selling, right? Mm-hmm. Or why are you working for the company that you work for? Because that's what a lot of people, it's like they're not quite sold on where they are, but they'll stay there because, they need a paycheck or it's like, dude, you're never going to be crazy successful in sales unless you're in a vehicle that you feel really confident about. Like, that you feel really comfortable being able to deliver on. Because, at the end of the day, if we were selling this vision of how we would simplify, working with us on a paving project or on asphalt and concrete assets, managing those portfolios across the country, we're just selling a dream and we can't deliver on it. Like, you're not going to believe in it, right? And neither is anybody else. And so that's what it comes down to. And when you're working with, like, let's just say you're going shopping for cars. Everybody's been in this situation before, right? You walk onto a used car lot and, you figure out who that company is based on the salespeople that you're working with. If you've got some bum out in the parking lot with you walking around, doesn't know jack shit about cars and doesn't know, anything about what they're selling, and they don't have a whole lot of confidence about it, like, your confidence in buying, especially a used car in that place, is not going to be great, right? Versus if somebody comes out, they're well polished, they ask you a lot of questions, they're well put together, they actually care about like what kind of car you're buying. That transfer of energy is completely different, right? There's a transfer of certainty to the buyer. There's a transfer of uncertainty to the buyer. And we talk about that all the time, man. Another thing that isn't talked about nearly enough in the basics is like, what does somebody look like when they show up? We talk about this in construction all the time for those people that sell residential. It's like, dude, are you pulling up to somebody's house in a truck that when you open the door, the soda bottles roll out, or, you got trash all over your dash, or like all the estimates that you've written for the day, or, all over the passenger seat? Like, what's your car look like? It's like, those are the basics, man, that give people certainty or uncertainty. It's like, if you look like a bum,
they're going to treat you like a bum. And
people are going to be a little less certain of you, right? And that's how sales works, man. If you don't like it, you shouldn't be in it, because sales is a judgment game. People are evaluating because you're trying to take their money, right? As a salesperson, your job is to accept money from people for solving their problems, right? In exchange for solving their problems, finding a solution to what it is that's challenging them or that they're looking to purchase or solve for. And then you get paid in exchange for that. And the faster you can do it for them, the more you'll get paid. The more times you can do it, the more you'll get paid. The easier you make it, the better the customer experience, the more people are willing to pay for that. And, it happens to me at the house all the time, man. Like, I want to do stuff, around the house. It's like, well, I could play the game and be the cheap shopper person that goes around and gets 3 bids. But guess what? That contractor that I send to my house is going to be around my kids. It's going to be around my wife. So, like, what is the value? I just had Steve, the guy that paints everything in our office. Steve was at my house last night sealing our back patio. It's like, dude, I've known Steve for years. Like, trust him around my kids, my family. And so, like, why would I go shop Steve's price? Now, in exchange for that, Steve has to be reasonable with me, right? If I think I'm being taken advantage of, then I'm going to look at that. That's the transfer of trust. It's like, man, if you have that, you're going to build a lot of relationships over time. And once you build a lot of those relationships, like, all the stress of like, where's the next deal going to come from goes away.
I've experienced that in my, I really haven't been in sales for, I'll be honest with you, not that long. It's only
What,
been
3
a
years, 2
handful of
years?
years. Yeah, 4 years. I think, I've been around it enough to like, I was able to take the things that you taught me and implement them right away and see a lot of, success very quickly. But, the biggest thing that I've learned is that it's all about relationships. It is all about relationships. And I don't mean that in like, you just got to build relationships with people and think like, it's like, no, you have to service people, but like, and you have to provide value to people. And first you have to be likable, then you can be trusted, right? First you have to be likable, then you can be trusted as a salesperson. And through that, you build relationships. Through delivering on what it is that you say you're going to do, you build deep relationships with people. Through treating people as if they are a human being, which, in today's day and age, unfortunately doesn't happen often, especially like, in our industry, it's unfortunate, man. Like a lot of contractors out there, like, they get busy with work and they don't return calls, or they think it's a power move to not call people back. They're like, oh yeah, I was so busy. Like, here's your estimate.
I would disagree with that.
Like,
I think it's fortunate for us.
Well, it's fortunate for us. It's unfortunate though, like in the world of sales, it's like,
well, it definitely doesn't make people trust salespeople. And that is, that's one of the things that the basics will do for you is, being great at the fundamentals or being great at the basics in sales. Like and if you've ever been around somebody like this, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like that person that just has it, like they have, that trust factor. Like I always said this about you, like, Eli is like, that person that like you're talking to him, like it's just an easy conversation. They call these people in the world of sales like the silent killers, right? It's like, because they're
assassin.
Yeah, they're closing the deals. And that sounds negative. That's like an internal sales thing, but it's not. For those people that buy from salespeople, the silent killer a lot of times is just the person that services you the best. Like, they're the person that makes you recognize what challenges you do have, which, you can't create challenges for somebody. You can't create problems that need to be solved. If somebody doesn't have problems, they don't have problems, right? But if you can uncover those problems by asking great questions, and then you can provide solutions that are based on what they told you they wanted and how they wanted it delivered, you're going to be a great salesperson. And so those people, the reason why they call them silent killers, because most people don't feel sold. So like they're getting to the end of a transaction or an interaction, and it just feels natural. It's like, okay, I'm going to pay this to get this solved for me, and it's like you feel good about it. Like that's how I feel when I'm working with anybody who's great at service. They do what they say they're going to do. They show up on time. They do all the things that check the box. It's like I don't really have to be sold much because they've built trust with me, right? And until they violate that trust or break that trust, like I'm going to give them trust. And so, when you think about sales at its most basic form, sales is solving problems. And the people that are the best at solving the problems, it just makes you feel like you're not being sold at all. Like they're just doing the basics really well, which, again, communication is the key to sales. What people get wrong is they think communication is doing this. Communication is actually, being intentional about what you ask somebody and then listening, or sometimes it's just listening in general.
So that's so true, man. I want to give a quick little tip that I've come to realize over the past year, past few years here. When I go into a new customer meeting or just even a meeting with any customer, my goal is not to speak 80% of the time. My goal is to speak 20%. I take like the 80-20 rule, right? And I implement that into my conversations with people. My goal is to ask them a few questions and allow them to talk, because allowing them to talk, one, they're going to want to talk about themselves and about what they have going on in their company, etc. It's going to unveil a lot, for me that I can, use to help them. But two, they're going to find that they really like me because I allowed them to talk. If I talk for 20% of the time, they talk for 80% of the time, I guarantee you they're going to walk away from that conversation going, holy shit, that dude Eli, he is the best in the entire world, right? And that's just something that I've like tried to implement. And I don't mean talk for 20% of the time and just hear or listen. Like truly listen for 80% of the time, right? And ask deep questions. Don't just ask shallow questions, but truly ask like real questions that develop a relationship. And when you do that, I guarantee you, you're going to develop deep relationships with people. And those first calls with customers, like they're going to be good, and those people are going to like you. They're going to like, I found times where I've talked 80% of the time and I walk away from that. I'm like, I don't think that really went that well. And sure enough, now I'm on the chase with that customer because they might have walked away from that thinking the same thing, because now I talked 80% of the time. So talk 20%, truly listen 80% of the time. And I guarantee you, you're going to walk away from that meeting, and they're going to walk away from that meeting going, holy shit, that dude is a great dude. I need to do business with him.
Yeah,
It
really is relationships, right? And so it's not a tactic. Like,
No.
you have to learn sales in a way that like you understand how to do this. But when you get really good at communication and having patterns in your communication of like asking the right questions, to your point, listening, and then being able to formulate a solution or a response to those problems that people have, like that just, it feels like a very natural conversation. Like if somebody were to observe one of our meetings with a client, like they wouldn't think like, all these guys are trying to sell them something. We're not actually trying to sell them anything at all. We're trying to figure out what problem exists that we have a solution to. That's what sales actually is. Like it's not about me convincing you that you need something that you don't need. The fundamentals get you closer to that feeling of like, yeah, this just makes sense to do it. Like, let's roll. Let me sign the contract and let's move forward.
I'll tell you, how I approach conversations with new clients is it's not to sell anything to anyone, right? When I'm jumping on a call or I'm getting in person with a new client, my goal of that conversation is to figure out if we're a good fit for them, figure out if our values line up, and if both of those things are true, it probably is going to make sense to work together. That's it. Like, I'm not trying to sell something right away to them.
Yeah, it doesn't work. I mean, you can't actually sell somebody something they don't want. Like,
No.
Or they'll hate you or they'll return it. Like, or they'll change their mind after that interaction. Like it happens all the time, right? You got people go buy something at the store and they get home, they're like, what the hell did I just do, right? Because
buyer's remorse.
They either sold themselves or somebody told them, or maybe they got sold something online by somebody indirectly, but like somehow they got convinced that they need something, and then they don't actually need it. They don't understand even why they bought it, and so they get uncertain about it. And that is what not doing the fundamentals right in sales leads to. It's like if all you're doing is talking and you're not listening to somebody else, you're not qualifying what it is that they need, you're not going to be successful, because enough people will sniff that out that like they get uncertain. They don't, even if they buy something from you once, they won't come back and buy again. And so the goal of our company has always been like, dude, we don't want to do a job for somebody. We want to be a partner for life.
Yeah.
And so, if we're not the right price or fit or whatever it is on the first job, like we don't care about that. Our concern is building the relationship and best understanding their problems so that we can deliver value to them better than anybody else. And, it comes back to the old thing that we've said since day one. It's like, if you spend $1 with the Pavement Group, it's going to go further than it would with any other contractor. And if that's not the case, then you shouldn't spend money with us, right? If you don't believe that, if you don't think that you're getting some sort of value for the service that we're providing, you shouldn't give us $1 of your money, because we know what we provide. We know what the ROI is of doing things the right way, efficiently, with less risk and more safety and all the things that we do. But if we can't transfer that, we don't deserve to earn somebody's business.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, bro. I'm right there with you. It all comes down to relationships, and it comes down to, I always say it too, like being a true and authentic person. Like sales is not, here's what it's not, right? It's not convincing somebody that they need something that they don't really need. Like that's not what it is.
Correct.
It's building relationships with people, focusing, if you focus on the fundamentals, build relationships with people. And truly focus on the fundamentals of sales, like you will see success. That's what I've done. you could sell, I mean, really anything that you actually believe in to anyone who needs it by focusing on those things, right?
Oh, dude,
If you didn't know the difference between asphalt and concrete in our organization, you could still be a very well performing salesperson with the right people around you. 100%.
I've done it, man. I've sold, I sold in this business before I had, any level of reasonable technical knowledge. Because the reality of this business is it's usually not about technical knowledge that, really fully gets a deal closed. Like, and there's, in my case, when I was doing it, I had resources that had technical knowledge. I didn't need it.
And
I needed to service the client, and I needed to ask them what their problems were and listen to that. And when I heard that, I was like, dude, it doesn't have anything to do with the work.
Yeah.
Like, it has to do with communication and transparency and collaboration and, doing what you say you're going to do and, listening to them. Like, what is their actual problem? Because their problem isn't the quality of work. The problem isn't, that they hate all the contractors. The problem is that nobody's doing what they say they're going to do. And the whole other list of issues that are commonly known for to be connected to contractors. It's like they don't answer the phone, they don't communicate well, they don't. All of that stuff is what people actually need a solution to. They don't need every explanation of all the makeup of what's in asphalt, what's contained in it. Like, great if you know that, that's useful, but it's not always useful to the client. In fact, it most of the time confuses them.
Yeah, my approach to this, again, I'm turning 26 here soon. Like, I'm young, right? I've been in this industry long enough to where I know my way around asphalt concrete. Like, I've seen the work done a lot, right? I've sold a lot of it. But at the end of the day, there's things I don't know. And I always, like, as a salesperson, if I don't know something, I've always brought on somebody from our team who does, right? I brought in an outside resource, especially when I was first starting off. I leaned on Mike heavily, leaned on you.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were jobs where you and I went and walked together, met customers together. I remember there's a job in Warrendale here that you and I probably maybe 3 years ago walked together.
Yeah. Then you ended up closing it like a year later or something.
I ended up closing it that year. Now we've done.
And then we did the second part of it.
Yeah, we've done second, third, and fourth phase of it. And now Paige is working on the same client now,
Yep.
the same location. We do work pretty much there every year. It's a giant facility. But at the end of the day, man, I've always leaned on pulling people in. If I don't know something, I'm not gonna lie to the customer and say, yeah, I know. Listen, I don't know that answer, but I'm gonna bring somebody in who's an expert on my team, who can help with this conversation, who can make sure we're approaching this in the right way. And I would just encourage any salesperson out there, anyone who's interested in sales too. Like, if you get into an industry, it doesn't have to be asphalt, concrete. It could be any industry, and you don't know something, pull somebody in. Be honest with the customer. This is sell the truth, man. Like this,
Yeah.
Literally, the title of the show is Sell the Truth, because there are so many salespeople out there, or sales influencers who, always say, just say yes and figure it out. And it's like, well, yeah, you could say yes, but be honest with them and get somebody in your court who can help deliver on what it is that the customer needs. So, Brian, with that, what advice would you give to somebody, kind of final question, what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe looking to get into sales or is new to sales? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, and you just be relentless and work your tail off, man, because you don't get opportunities, and if you don't take action, and the only way to get better is to work through the opportunities. When I lead anybody that's getting into sales, I always call it like the rule of 100. Like, you cold call 100 people, or you email 100 people, or you set 100 appointments and run those appointments. You sit down and give 100 proposals. You complete 100 proposals. You negotiate 100 times. You go through that whole process 100 times. You're going to know a lot more than you did before you had that experience. And, now for me, decades later, it's like, this stuff just happens. Like, I'm not smarter than anybody else. I'm not, I just have a lot more at bats at it. And, there's still stuff that I learn all the time, little things that you can do, words that you use or don't use, because it changes people's opinions of things. Mm-hmm. But the most important skill that you can have as a salesperson is to be relentless. It's your work ethic that will determine your success. I've never seen anybody that's lazy make it in sales. And so,
100%.
it comes down to, you know, it's not about the days that things are good on how you will be measured and what matters in your career in sales. It's those time periods where everybody says no to you, where everything looks negative, where everything is stacked against you. And your ability to be relentless and resilient in those moments is going to determine how much money you make, how successful you are, how people view you as a salesperson. Because if you only want to be positive during the times when things are good, customers sense that too. It's like, oh, so somebody isn't giving you money, you treat them differently, right? Like, you know, somebody says no to you. Hey, no, I'm not going to do this project right now, or you didn't win this one. If you treat them different, you're not going to have a lot of long-standing relationships. And so your ability to stay in the moment, be relentless, be resilient, and work your tail off, take all the at-bats that you can, like that's what's going to get you to the promised land as fast as possible.
Bro, I love it. Go back to the basics, man. Go back to the basics.
That's it.
Where can people find you, Brian, if they want to follow you?
Real Brian Hess, RealBrianHess on all platforms. Easy to find. Or you can
And
just Google me.
At the Brian Hess Show.
Yes, 8 a.m.
8 a.m. Eastern.
8 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. I think we did episode 738, 737, 738 this morning, something like that. So we've been at it for a minute, and yeah, we try to bring new topics. Sometimes we talk sales, business, faith, family, finance, whatever. But yeah, the Brian Hess Show's been running for quite a while.
Longer than this show, I can tell you that. You've been pushing me in the. I got to say too, Brian's been pushing me to start my own show for probably 3 years now.
About time.
And, I'm gonna be honest. For the longest time, I'm like, I didn't feel qualified to do it. And,
yeah, I felt that way too, man. I still some days don't feel too qualified, but yeah. So leave this guy a review, like, comment, subscribe, all the above. You know how it works. Just if you're listening on the podcast platforms, reviews help these podcasts get found easier. And if you're on YouTube or one of those platforms, leave a comment so we can see where you're from. Let us know if you got any questions, and we'll be happy to answer them, whether it's on one of these episodes or directly to you. Send us a DM, and we're all about helping people, and just appreciate you guys following along on the journey that we're on, and what this guy's doing. And yeah, stay tuned. More to come.
Appreciate it, dude. Appreciate it. Well, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate
Anytime,
you being
brother.
on. And thank you guys for tuning in as well. I hope this topic was helpful, because honestly, it's one of the most important topics that we could talk about on the show. It's like going back to the fundamentals, doing the things every single day, day in and day out, that you need to do. It's not about the word tracks. It's not about it's not about the little tiny things here and there that like you see online. It's like, go back to the fundamentals, the basics. If you don't know what those are, go back and rewatch the show, re-listen to it, take notes, because this dude right here, he knows them, and he just shared all the fundamentals. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode of Sell the Truth. Peace out.